Hi, everybody. So I'm just getting our recording set up again because I'm quite confident that with so many brilliant people on board, some good ideas were cooked up in these small groups, and I want to hear about it. So is anybody moved to start and tell me a little bit about what came up in your group?
I've got to go, so I just want to say thank you, Paul, so much, and thank you to everybody. And Michelle.
Hey, this is Steve. I'll share from our group. We talked about like how do you mobilize massive amounts of people in this type of cause. We were reflecting on some recent successes in campaigns from, for example, the Sunrise Movement, in terms of really boiling down complex issues into things like the Green New Deal, which I feel like a lot of people support but have no idea what's in it, and things like getting Deb Haaland nominated and confirmed as a cabinet secretary. Even though they had a whole list of cabinet picks, they really pushed for like her as their main thing and were successful. And I feel we talked about how just being able to take complex issues, pick like the most high leverage one, like what Buckminster Fuller called like the trim tab, sort of the highest leverage intervention point, brand it and blast it out there, is sort of the right approach. We also talked about education and really getting material into the classroom, both as ways to engage people and to get sort of volunteer labor for evangelizing and lobbying and things like that.
Anyone else ready to go to share what y'all came up with? Otherwise, I'm going to start picking on people. I was a teacher. I know how to do that. Do we have any volunteers? Go ahead, Benny. Even though you're kind of sideways. I get unmuted there.
We talked about how there is like one of the main sources of inaction is political, not like general overwhelm in terms of like it's such a big issue, like psychological overwhelm, but also in addition to that, just a political exhaustion. And that perhaps that's more powerful than that's just, what would be just apathy is actually those two. Maybe more so than true apathy. Maybe there's apathy underneath that, but like the first layer is those two: overwhelm, psychological overwhelm, and political exhaustion. And so, that came up, and what followed was kind of a very brief discussion about just trying to reframe into an inspiring message rather than fear-based, which Paul's really good at. Inspiring the heroism in the everyday citizen through everyday action is might be a helpful path. Danny, you want to add anything else to that?
Well, yeah, just to say that I really appreciated Paul saying that we need to turn leadership over to the scientists, and and in my opinion, stop trying to be the heroes ourselves, but to be willing to follow people who know what they're talking about. And I also appreciated his slide about how there's overwhelming support for the Green New Deal across all political lines. It's, to get away from this divisive the divisiveness of politics that we've fallen into, and to be willing to look for new leaders, not necessarily political leaders, to help us out of this. And to recognize the value of the indigenous people and their land, things like that. It's like, step aside, folks. Let's give this over to people who really can help.
Okay, so Roland, Leoma, Derek, anything out of your room that you want to share with the rest of us?
I'll just say
Roland,
that we did talk about telling a compelling vision story to get people to want the future rather than trying to scare them into, if you don't do this, then bad things will happen. And then how do I don't have an answer as to how we get that through the corporate owned media, a story of possibility.
Well, I can add that I am greatly heartened by what we've achieved in the last year. I hear people say, yeah, we're exhausted and so on and so forth, but we led a tremendous battle and we managed to unelect Trump, and then the Biden administration turns out to be much more to our liking than we had hoped for. And now it's time to continue the battle. And it is happening. People are making phone calls again. And what Brett mentioned, that people are fighting to get the California Green New Deal. So I understand that everybody has to lick their wounds and take a deep breath. But, this is a long haul battle, and we can do it. And I'm greatly appreciative for Paul's input there. We are making headway. We are making headway. That's what I want to share.
Yeah, Carol, go ahead. Unmute.
Okay, Paul, I wish I could remember the question I was asking you when we were ending our group about that you were talking about something to do with Bill McKibben. We were discussing 350.org as a means to push for 30 by 30 and better New Deal, the actual Green New Deal. But was there something you were saying about Bill McKibben just as we were ending that I wanted to hear, but I forgot what it was all about?
I was just saying that, America in particular has a lot of room for improvement in our practical belief in democracy, our faith in each other, in the ability of our fellow people to participate intelligently and with care in public affairs. That poll about the Green New Deal is an example of how we wildly underestimate each other. There really are not a lot of people whose fondest wish is turning the earth into a briquette. There just aren't. But what there isn't in those large organizations is that kind of practical democracy, where the kind of work I'm doing would be much more effective if everyone doing it were networked together. because then you can start taking what we kind of all know needs to happen, but you can start refining it and distilling it and creating different ways of articulating it that reflect, the great diversity of humanity here in America. There still is some, and so yeah, large organizations don't do that well right now. The whole mass movement as the model of change does have some problems built into it. That thing about the New Deal, incredible how those councils of the unemployed, with some help from socialists and left-leaning labor unions, even some communists, but they started having the conversation. What would it look like if instead of impoverishing the majority of the population, we had a society that was improving their lot? How would that happen? That conversation was so menacing to the very interests that had caused the Depression. It created this vast opening in Congress. Very conservative Congress passed big departures. So we underestimate that part of it, the need for us to be having this conversation. And then a lot is possible.
I just want to drop in that given that the unemployment levels are starting to approximate what they had been, given how much easier communication is even during COVID, that we do have all of these channels of communication that weren't available 90 years ago. There's a window here where there are a lot of people who, could they get informed and mobilized, could make really big changes happen because they know they need it, because they know they're desperate. The other thing that just intrigues the heck out of me, and I don't know how practical it is, I forget, but it was something like, even amongst conservative Republicans, support for the Green New Deal was at something like 12 or 15%.
57.
Well, 57 for somewhat support and strong support, but the strong support was more than 10%. And let's get those people and have some kind of conversation where we help them frame the message for why it would be good for conservative Republicans. Because that argument can be made. It's all about domestic peace and tranquility and loving thy neighbor and other things that conservative Republicans could probably get behind, again, if it were framed.
Mm-hmm. So how do we find those people?
At the stores, when you wait to get into Trader Joe's, have conversations with people. And I believe that every time we say the right thing in a friendly way, not in a preachy way, or better yet, just ask people, what do you think about this and this? And then if there's an opportune moment to chime in and say, well, this is what I heard. That's how changes are made. And then there, of course, there needs to be a political decision eventually. But let's look at the fact that, the awareness of climate change has grown tremendously in the vast numbers. People now know that there is climate change. And what do? We talked about it. We talked about it. We didn't give up.
Faith-based organizations was brought up. I think that cuts across the lines to a certain degree, and it does reach the more conservative people. But I don't know who goes to all these faith-based organizations in terms of national network. That kind of needs to be created at this point.
So
Probably
there
by
are,
internet.
so Carol, there are groups that are specifically working on climate with faith-based organizations. There's
Mhm.
Interfaith Power and Light, and that's what they do.
Mhm.
And especially for 30 by 30, there's the Interfaith Rainforest Alliance, which is global.
Okay.
But then you also have, like, within the climate crisis policy group, they have a subsection that is for faith communities.
Right.
And
We were
so
talking-
they're working, they're working at it sort of from that angle, bringing a bunch of people together and seeing, well, a lot of them are coming from faith communities and want to talk about climate policy. And then one assumes then taking those out to their faith-based communities. Now, it was a surprisingly high percentage, given their percentage in the population, of Quakers and Unitarians, with a handful of Buddhists and some Catholics, and a few progressive Jewish groups. Those were the people who were showing up in the climate policy faith-based group meetings. So it tends to be, people from largely urban rather than rural, progressive rather than
Yeah.
conservative church groups who are showing up there. But it's at least a way to get it started. And Interfaith Power and Light, I'm not sure how wide their reach is in terms of, do they get a lot of more conservative evangelical groups signing on or not? I'm not sure.
Right now, we're doing something that I think could help. There's a new study that came out that says we could have saved 84,000 lives if we'd had, at the outset of the pandemic, a national moratorium on utility shutoffs. So there was a call by about 600 plus advocacy groups. They weren't all climate groups or even environmental groups. When Biden first took office, do that. He didn't do it. And right now, the LA Times just published in late March a story about how 1 in 3 American households has this untenable amount of unpaid utility bills, of utility debt. And the amounts are really quite large. In Massachusetts, there are 500,000 people who owe more than $1,000. It's not a big state. So we in the climate movement believe that energy needs to work for the common good. So it can't be fossil fuels anymore. We think government has something to say, the people have something to say about what we do with energy. We do not always do a great job of conveying that we care at all about the immediate welfare of human beings. Climate advocates can sound cold. They can even sound a little bit, like they don't like people very much. So if every climate group, were to really actively in their community at all levels of government push for this, then you're saying, I care about you. We need to just confess our motivation, is the way I think of it. We're motivated by love. We need to show it, right? That we are caring people. What we want is an infusion of care. And then that's not ideological.
Okay, so I've got Leoma and Carol, and then we need to be wrapping up because we're at time. So
Well, one thing I really appreciate, Paul, about your presentation is you're using statistics to pull forward key things, because that is a place statistics can be useful. So noting the protection of the wild areas and the Amazon and, the rainforest areas, noting a number of what you said, of course, was geared to the United States, like the anti-fracking, but they're fracking in other parts of the world too. And so I tend to get overwhelmed because I am not very good at political sort of stuff. You start talking about protest and I find myself getting more and more discouraged and depressed. But when you start talking about love and caring, well, my heart picks up a little bit and thinks, well, maybe I don't have to just make endless phone calls to endless people who don't want to hear from me. But I'm thinking, for instance, that one of our Quakers is connected with a worldwide group of Quakers, which is not a large number of people because there's not a large number of people, Quakers in the world, although the most Quakers are actually in Kenya. But this idea of conversations about things like anti-fracking and caring for the wild areas are things that could be global conversations as well. I mean, Carol Brown, the faith me. So that's interesting to me that in a small way, your statistics might inform conversations elsewhere.
So, Carol?
I think we may underestimate the evangelicals and other church groups. There are some evangelicals who have rejected the worst mistakes of some other evangelicals. And I think it might be worth whatever interfaith group works on this to reach out to all the different faiths and their national organizations. I mean, I'm talking national organizations, but I don't know how that would be done. But there must be some people in each division that are concerned about this, that can bring it to their national audience and local audiences. So.
Okay, well,
thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been
everybody
lovely to have everyone here, and I realized I was going to queue something up and didn't do it, so give me just a moment to I just wanted to drop into chat here our upcoming meetings, but I have to find that list. But I do want to just really say thank you for all of the people who were on the call today and for all of your ideas and commitment and dedication. So I'm just pasting into the chat here what Nova Sutra's upcoming events are. We have a whole variety of online things, and we will be doing some in-person things in Santa Cruz starting in the next couple of weeks, COVID permitting, and they'll all be outdoor events. There's going to be an Earth Day celebration. We'll get confirmation on that tomorrow, but the current plan is that there will be an Earth Day celebration at the downtown farmers market location on Saturday, April 24th from 1 to 4. Nova Sutras will be there with a table. Santa Cruz Climate Action Network are the ones who are organizing it. And then we are going to follow that up with practice that we do called Shinrin-yoku, which is just a spending time in nature. It's sometimes called forest bathing or forest immersion. And we're also going to try to resume at least a monthly schedule of public climate meditations, where we're out there with signs, probably at Lighthouse Field. And that will probably be the first weekend in May, like on late Sunday afternoon, sometime in there, when there will be lots of people around that we can just sit in silence and hold that space and remind people what we all care about. So those are some of the things coming up there. You can find out more about what we're up to at novasutras.org/events. Paul was mentioning the public utilities utilities shut-off moratoriums, or what we were calling utilities protection, I think was the direction we were going to go with that. So there will be some news about that coming to the Nova Sutras website soon. We do have the child hardship fact force on Nova Sutras that you can find out more about in general. Some of the other broader concerns and policies about what's happening in terms of impacts on families with children from COVID and the economic hardship that's associated with it. And we do have a climate policy page as well that Paul's been keeping updated with important news funneled that way. So, and we'll get everyone who is registered links for the video from this and a copy of Paul's slides, so you can get into them in detail and ask him questions and things like that. So just reach out to me if you have other questions or concerns. And I think that's about all I had. Any last closing remarks before we head out here?
Thank you.
What did you say about getting Paul's slides?
So everybody who registered, we'll get those out in an email in the next few days. All right.
Okay.
Take care. Be well.
Bye.
Wonderful to be with you all.
Thank you so much. Good to be with you all, everyone.